Welcome to Work Comp Talk, a podcast dedicated to all the injured workers here in the state of California. My name is Carmen, your host, and joining me, as usual, is our co-host, Bilal Kassem, managing attorney for Pacific Workers, the lawyers for injured workers, who also happen to be our sponsors. If you have yet to check them out, make sure you visit them at www.pacificworkers.com. They do have free consultations for you if you have questions, if there's anything you might need in regards to a workers' comp claim that you'd like to seek a consultation. They are free. You can go ahead and give them a call as well at 800-606-6999. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. That way you get notified every time we dump some new content on here, which we do constantly. And without further ado, let's jump into our topic for today. It's actually one of the most asked questions, and I think it gets confused a lot by the injured workers. Who pays for workers' comp? A lot of people have this perception that if I open up a workers' comp claim, I'm essentially going to bring my boss to bankruptcy because he's going to have to give me tons of money for my injuries, depending on the extent of the injuries. Is that true?
So workers' comp, it's insurance. It's not an employer expense. I mean, it is an employer expense insofar as there being monthly insurance premiums and things like that, but ultimately, the money comes from an insurance company. It's not your employer's paycheck that's, at issue.
Hint, hint, if your boss tells you, oh, please don't do this claim because I'm just going to not have the money for you and don't worry about it. It's not coming directly from their bank account. I mean, like you mentioned, right? It's a premium that they pay. Think about it as a car insurance. You're giving your premium for your car insurance monthly, and then if you're involved in an accident, the money comes from the insurance company.
Yeah, and, I guess technically, yes, it can come from your employer because they're paying the premiums. And it's like car accident insurance. Like you said, the more you're involved in accidents, the more your premium increases, right? It's a risk thing. And so I guess technically, yeah, having more claims can affect your employer's bottom line. But, unless your employer is self-insured, they're not paying the cost of the cases themselves. It's, a third party that's paying it.
And if they were to have that many cases and accidents happening, you might want to consider figuring out what's going on, because usually in that case, it tells you there must be some sort of OSHA violations if there's constant, workers getting injured. Not going to say Tesla. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, there's a lot of high-risk industries where it's just, there's a lot of work comp cases, and that is what it is. But to fault the injured worker is being like, well, it's your fault that I have to pay more. It's your fault. You're costing me money. It's like, that's just the cost of doing business. There's risk in the industry. Right. People get hurt. And as an employer in California, you're required to have work comp insurance for these people. And they're putting their body at issue and on the line for your business.
Right.
Like, if they need help, they deserve it.
Right. And I'm glad you put it that way. And you mentioned something very important that I kind of want to retouch. And that's the sense of them trying to make you feel like it's your fault. And essentially, it's their responsibility. And then they try to throw it in there and say, well, because of you, my company, and now my premium's going to be higher and whatnot. But again, don't get, I guess, persuaded by your boss, your employer, that, oh, don't worry about it. I'd rather you not do the claim so that it doesn't affect me and I don't have to put a higher premium. I'd rather just pay for your doctors. Just tell them it happened at home. Mm-hmm. That also happens a lot with this particular question. The injured worker doesn't necessarily know who's paying for the workers' comp, so it's easier for them to just be like, I love my boss. I love working with this company. I don't want to jeopardize them. Mm-hmm. And then that's where that can easily lead them to listening to their boss, and then we know what happens.
Yeah. People, they're easily influenced by their employer. It's sad, but, people's health care is on the line, their paychecks, their ability to care for themselves and their family. And so they don't want to rock the boat, and so sometimes their employer will push them in a bad direction. And unfortunately, they listen,
What happens in those cases? Have you ever had a case where someone came to you and said, well, my boss said that we're going to take care of the payments, and then all of a sudden I need this, and they're not taking care of the payments? You take in the case. What does that look like?
Yeah, you see it a lot. Employers will say, oh, don't report this. It's going to affect my insurance and blah, blah, blah. I'll take care of you. I'll pay for things. And then the employer finds out, it's more costly than they thought it would be. And I think they maybe have a change of heart, or they simply can't afford it, in which case it's the injured worker that pays for it. And then they want to pursue a work comp case later down the road, and the insurance company's perspective is, oh, if you were really hurt, if you really needed medical care, how come this wasn't reported sooner? And it can cause problems for the case.
Yikes. Okay, good to know. If you ever get injured and if it's at work, make sure you just go through the system. Is there anything else we need to know in regards to who pays for workers' comp? Is there any other situation? I know there's third parties that are involved, and a lot of people also question how that money comes about.
I mean, sort of, it depends. There's other cases, what they call 132A claims, which are retaliation or discrimination cases because of workers' comp. Those cases are actually paid by the employer because the case is against the employer. Same thing with what we call serious and willful misconduct, which is an allegation that the employer did something really stupid and actually caused your injuries through something more than negligence. And again, if there's penalties involved with that, it's the employer that's responsible for it.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, well, is there anything else we need to talk about as far as like who pays? What if the claims adjuster says, well, I'm only going to give you this amount? Does it then fall into like your claim adjuster is the one paying you?
No, I mean, it's always going to be the insurance. There's other benefits you can get to, Social Security benefits that are related to work injuries. You can get state disability insurance if you've exhausted your temporary disability or your case is denied. That's paid by the state of California, EDD. There's a variety of sources of income and benefits that get involved in workers' comp cases. But generally, when you're just talking about workers' comp benefits, if it's temporary disability, it's permanent disability, medical care, transportation, mileage reimbursement, all that stuff, that's all covered by the insurance company.
What happens if my employer doesn't have insurance? Who pays for my workers' comp then?
So California has something called the Uninsured Employers Benefits Trust Fund, which is like a slush fund, basically. It's like their own version of insurance, and it's there to back workers' comp cases when injured workers have work injuries and their employer is illegally uninsured.
Does that happen a lot? Is there a lot of employers that don't have it? Do you see that a lot?
Fair amount. Probably, it's not that often, maybe one or two every 100 cases or so you get something like that. Usually it's a smaller business, someone who's operating as a sole owner and operator, or maybe there's a couple employees, but they don't really have a great operation set up. Gotcha. They don't have insurance coverage. They don't provide benefits for people. It's like cash under the table type employment. So you'll see it in those cases.
Yikes.
Big established companies, not so much.
Okay. I think those are all the questions I can think of in regards to who pays for the workers' comp. You did talk about, there is this essential opportunities that come in from EDD payments, other things that kind of play into the role of who pays out. There's also the voucher, which is also part of the state. It obviously varies, right? Like if someone's watching this and they're not from California, every state has different regulations and such, right?
Yeah, I mean, workers' comp's a state provided benefit, so your experience going through workers' comp in California could be much different than Arizona, which could be much different than Utah or New York or wherever you're at. It's not controlled federally. So cases are different across all states, as are the benefits. But generally, again, I think in most instances, there's an insurance company that's paying.
Good to know. Well, that's it for today. If you guys have any questions, make sure you guys put them down in the comments, and we'll be more than happy to answer those. Thank you, Bilal, for joining us.